Here we go. Wait a second. Think I'm unmuted. There we go. Hey, folks. Welcome back to Get to Know Dynatrace. I'm your host, David Jones. Everyone calls me Jonesy, so feel free. It's been a couple of months since the last we've had an opportunity to do one of these sessions, and so many exciting things have happened in those past couple of months. And I'm really excited today to be able to talk about a few of them. Now, with Get to Know Dynatrace, what makes these sessions so unique and so useful are your questions. And so later on in today's program, what we want to do is we're going to go through a demonstration, and we want to have you ask us questions as we're going through this demonstration. So if you think about some questions, by all means, feel free to type them into whatever sort of platform you're using to watch us here today. If you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Facebook, Twitch, whatever it might be, go ahead and just type in those questions and they'll pop up on our screen, and we'll do our best to get those answered. So, folks, as I mentioned, it's been a couple months since we've had one of these sessions, and a lot has happened. As you could tell from that intro reel, we had Dynatrace Perform 2023 going on. And I have to say, I've been doing Perform for years. And this last one was honestly the most exciting, the most information-packed Perform that we've ever had. It was a fabulous experience, and there's just so many new things for us to talk about. Now, as always with Get to Know Dynatrace, there's a couple of segments that we like to start things off with, and then we hand things over to our guest solution engineer to actually do a demonstration. So let me just start by sharing my screen here, and let's get going. So I'm going to just click on this. Let's get my presentation up here, and this is it. This is our new season of Getting to Know Dynatrace. And as always, the first segment is What's New? Well, what's new? I just mentioned it. It was Perform 2023. And just the amazing number of announcements that we made during Perform 2023. It was an unbelievable show. We announced so many new capabilities for the platform that I can't honestly list them all here today in this Getting to Know Dynatrace session. So what we're going to do over the next couple of Getting to Know Dynatrace sessions is we're going to dive into many of these announcements. But these announcements are everything from the announcement of our new App Engine, everything from our new capabilities around our data lakehouse, which is called Grail, everything from our automation engine, which is a brand new announcement, all of the new apps that are built on top of that app engine and take advantage of that automation engine. There's just, folks, like I said, too many things that we announced during the Perform 2023 for me to go through all of them today. But everything that was announced is super exciting, and it really, what it does is it's going to allow you to leverage that Dynatrace platform and be able to do things that you hadn't honestly probably been thinking about being able to do, because Dynatrace is going to unlock the ability for you to ask questions of your data in a way that you've never been able to ask questions. So, folks, if you want, by all means, go to dynatrace.com, go to our resource center and Perform 2023, and you can even see some of those sessions. You can see some of the highlights. You can watch some videos of these sessions. We had amazing speakers. Our CTO, Bernd Greifenator, blew us away with the announcements that he made on stage. We had a fabulous speaker, very insightful thoughts on AI from Hannah Fry. We had always entertaining and always informative conversation with Kelsey Hightower, and we wrapped things up with Tony Hawk. And how fun is that? So all of this content is now available in our resource center. So I invite you to go check out our resource center and have a look. So, folks, with the what's new section, obviously Perform 2023 is the big item to talk about. But hey, there's other things going on here at Dynatrace, always going on. If you want to know about what's new at Dynatrace, I invite you to go look for our news site. So just go to dynatrace.com/news/blog, and you'll see all sorts of content that we're constantly updating. As always, remember the Dynatrace platform. We release new capabilities every couple of weeks. So that's like twice a month. For our managed or on-premise customers, that's usually once a month. So there's always a new set of capabilities that's being released on our platform. And so obviously, go to our blog site, have a look. You can see here on the screen that we're talking about new release notes for new capabilities on our SaaS platform, new capabilities on our managed platform. We're talking about partnerships now that we're doing with Microsoft to allow us to actually empower DevSecOps at scale. We are talking about, and there's articles there talking about how we can, again, go in deeper that DevSecOps lifecycle coverage with our partner SNCC, who allows us to get a lot of visibility into where potential vulnerabilities might lie within your code base. So these are all really exciting things. I invite you to go to our blog site to always check up on what's new. So, folks, that leads us to our next session. Our next section is always, did you know? So this, I like to have some fun, and I like to basically, mention things that you might not have been aware of. Now, obviously, a lot of the things that we talked about at Perform 2023 have to do with our Grail data lakehouse technology. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was, did you know that with Dynatrace, you can define log processing rules? These rules allow you to ingest data from your logs, but then be able to transform that data as it's being ingested. This allows you to have an immense set of capabilities to allow you to take formats of data that you, quite honestly, if a human was ever looking at that, they would find it indecipherable, and be able to parse it out, and we can process it and then store it inside of Dynatrace in a much more meaningful way. And so we provide all sorts of examples of what these log processing rules could be like. So for example, we could use the log processing rule to fix an unrecognized timestamp or log level. We can use them to for example, create a build duration metric for AWS services using that log data. We can use it for manipulating any attribute from that log, not just the content, but even if there's like metadata or structure that we want to use. So these log processing rules really unshackle what logs can provide you in terms of getting visibility into your applications. And so this is something that you've probably not seen before or weren't even aware that Dynatrace was capable of doing. But as you are ingesting logs into Dynatrace, you have a very powerful set of processing rules that allow you to really structure that information in any way that you could possibly want. And so, folks, just keep that in mind. That's super important because, as we move forward and we start talking more and more about our Grail data lakehouse, being able to take that information from all sorts of different external sources and then being able to store it in that data lakehouse in a way that's meaningful for you is a really powerful thing. So, folks, that's this section of Did You Know? And did you know basically that you can define log processing rules in the Dynatrace platform. So with that, enough. This is, as always, getting to know Dynatrace is always about this next section, which is the demo. And today, our my slide all of a sudden went away. There we go. Our guest today is Aditya Ganesh, who's a solution engineer on our West team. Aditya, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
How long have you been at Dynatrace?
I've been at Dynatrace about a year now. It's been great. Jonesy, thanks for having me here. It's my first getting to know Dynatrace session, so looking forward to it.
Well, fabulous. Well, thanks for coming out and doing this session with us. So, folks, we're going to get into the demo now. We're going to hand things over to Aditya, and as always, as I mentioned at the beginning, what makes these sessions so useful and so fun are your questions. So, as we start going through this session, please, by all means, start asking questions. And with that, let's hand things over to Aditya. Floor is all yours.
All righty. Let me start sharing my screen. Perfect. All right, you guys can see my screen here?
Looks good to me.
Awesome. All right, so as Jonesy mentioned, right, we had a bunch of new announcements at Perform, a lot of exciting stuff coming out soon. Can't wait to personally start using it and enable customers to start using it as well. But before we get into all these new features in the upcoming sessions I'm getting to know, I'm going to kind of circle back and pretty much start at the ground floor, right? What is Dynatrace for those of you who've joined today who don't have experience with Dynatrace or in the observability industry, right? What is Dynatrace? We are a full stack observability platform, right? So there's not really one correct answer to what we do because it's a lot of things, right? It's not just application performance monitoring, APM. It's not just infrastructure metrics. It's not just a logging solution. It doesn't just have application security or real user monitoring. It's kind of all encompassing to give that end-to-end visibility of your entire infrastructure, your entire environment. Right. So that being said, right, what you see here is one of our high-level dashboards. It's one of our, maybe you can call it an executive level dashboard, to pretty much show that we are indeed full stack, right? You can see here, we give visibility into how your applications are performing on the front end, right? We give visibility into your users who are accessing those applications, right? What are the health of those user sessions? Where are they accessing your applications from? Are they experiencing any issues? And then we dive down more granular level, right? Those backend services, those databases, those backend components that are serving up those front end applications, right? What are the health of those backend services, right? If you're running a multi-cloud infrastructure with using multiple cloud providers, or you're still running on-prem, doesn't matter whether it's hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, we're able to give visibility into that as well. Your network devices, your synthetic monitors, IoT devices, mobile apps, web apps, all these things, right? This is what kind of makes us that full stack observability platform, gives you that end-to-end visibility. And a lot of the times we get questions like, all right, well, in today's world, we're all transitioning from those monolithic applications, going towards more dynamic environments, to the containerized environments, Kubernetes, right? What can we do there? The answer is the same, right? What is the health of your Kubernetes clusters? What about the workloads and namespaces running in those clusters, the underlying pods and nodes, containers running in there? What are the health of all my transactions running in these applications? We're able to provide visibility on all these fronts, right? So as you can see here, we do capture a lot of data out of the box, right? And For us within the platform, it's not just the data that we're providing. We don't just merely just display these metrics for you, but what we're doing is providing context behind all this data with our AI ops engine that is at the core of our platform. So in a lot of cases, these dashboards, right, which by the way are very easy to configure, you can just kind of select any one of these tiles, configure the data you want to see, choose your visualizations, right? We have a neat little metrics page here, which kind of shows all the metrics that we're pulling into the environment. If you want to look at, for example, a response time, right? I can quickly just go here, create a chart from that, and then go back and pin that to one of my dashboards. So dashboarding is very easy, very configurable, and you're able to do that very seamlessly. One of the new announcements we did do at Perform is a dashboards on Grail. And what that's going to allow us to do then is, instead of going through the backend metrics within a specific tile, you can leverage our new query language, which is DQL, Dynatrace query language. Just write your query within the tile itself and display that chart directly on the dashboard. And when it comes to dashboards, right, in some cases, there's a great use for them. If you're on the network operations center, if you're managing your NOC, or if you're probably staring at a dashboard all day, right, to understand the health of your entire environment. Or if you're on the business side of the house, right, you care about high-level executive dashboards. What is the actual health of my business critical applications? Maybe you're looking at a dashboard and reporting on that front. But when it actually comes down to problem solving, troubleshooting what's going wrong in your environment, with our AI ops engine and with the platform, we're trying to take a different approach when it comes to observability, right? The goal here is not for us to stare at this dashboard and wait for some of these green circles to turn red and go, dissect what's going wrong in your environment, right? We're trying to get to take a more proactive approach as opposed to reactive when it comes down to observability. And we do that with our AI, right? Which is taking all these various metrics that you see here. It's going to put it into context. It's going to automatically analyze this data, and it's going to alert you anytime there's issues in your environment automatically. And we'll get into how it's doing all this. But I guess the first question really that we get is, how are we capturing all these metrics? How are we capturing all this data that you see here? And the answer is with what we call our one agent, right? So we use an agent-based technology called One Agent, right? And that's going to be deployed at the server level, your hosts of all your applications. And our agent is cloud agnostic and technology agnostic. Now, what does that mean? I mentioned hybrid cloud or multi-cloud environments. We're able to handle those. But there's also not need for separate agents for each technology in your environment, right? If you have Java, if you have Node, if you have PHP, etc., it is just, and it's I guess why we called it and why we named it One Agent, but it is just this technology agnostic one agent that's going to be deployed. And we support multiple platforms, as you see here, right? Windows, Linux, Kubernetes environments, right? Your OpenShift environments. In some cases, you don't have access to the server to deploy the agent, right? If you're running serverless functions, for example, AWS Lambda functions, Azure functions, we have creative ways to leverage the One Agent. In certain cases, it's the SDK. In certain cases, it's what we call the One Agent extensions to be able to pull that data in cases that we don't even are not able to even deploy our One Agent on the servers. And yeah, ease of deployment, right? So one thing is having just that one agent, which is cloud and technology agnostic, and the other is the ease of deployment. So, for example, right, for a Linux environment, all it takes to really get started with the one agent is copy pasting these 3 commands from our UI and running them on your Linux box, and you're up and running with the one agent. Similarly for Windows, all you got to do is download the One Agent installer from our deploy page, unpackage that MSI, and you're up and running with the One Agent. So our agent can be deployed in 2 forms, right? We call it full stack mode and infrastructure only mode. And now what I showed you in the first screen with that, that full stack dashboard was having the agent deployed in full stack mode, which is going to allow, right, that deep level all the way up to that code level and query level metrics. That's in full stack mode. And once we get this agent deployed, it's basically doing 2 things, right? And I'm going to pull up another screen in just a moment. But the first thing that this agent is doing once we get it deployed on your OS is auto detection and auto instrumentation. And what I
Hey,
mean by that,
hey, hold
yeah,
hold on.
Jonesy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, sorry, Aditya. We had a couple of questions come in,
Okay,
and before we get into the Smartscape, let's
sure.
take a moment and talk about these. So the first one here is there any way that we can create a dashboard with the agent version of all the hosts in Dynatrace? Now I had to think about this one for a second, and while I'm explaining my thought process on this, how about if you have a different way or a different thought about this, then by all means share it. But this is kind of an interesting one, and right off the bat, the way that I think I would first approach this is perhaps by creating some custom tagging rules. And in this particular case, Dynatrace has the ability for you to create metadata. We call them tags, right? So you can basically create tags that you can attach to an entity. So in this case, if I have a host entity, I would look to see, can I create a tag that actually pulls out the value, which is the current one agent version. Once I've got that, then I could go into the charts and I could split by tag as an example to get a list of all of the hosts that I have and the agent versions that are on them. That's off the top of my head one way that I would think that you could approach that issue. Another potential way of doing this, especially now with the new Grail functionality, is you could potentially also do it based upon a query on the log side, which would be another way of being able to get yourself a list. Now, normally what's going to happen is when you get yourself a chart or a list that's got yourself, all of those hosts in the upper right hand corner, more often than not, there should be a little ellipsis. You can click on it and you should be able to download that as a CSV. Now, the other question that you had around monitoring candidates, and so there was a second question from the same one. This is from Bhavani. The second question was, if we have monitoring candidates in Dynatrace, how do we pull them into a dashboard or export them into a CSV? This one's a little bit more interesting because there is a place that you can go in the host view inside of Dynatrace. And if you go in the upper right-hand corner into that ellipsis, it'll show you a list of those monitoring candidates. Now, the next question is, well, how do I export that as a CSV? That is actually probably a really good feature request. That's the type of thing that you could create an RFE. An RFE is a request for enhancement. You can go onto the Dynatrace community. Any user of Dynatrace can go into the Dynatrace community and can create an RFE, which is a suggestion about something that Dynatrace could be doing. Create that RFE, it goes out into the community and people get to vote on it. And if enough people think that this is a really interesting topic, then this is something that our product managers take into account when they're thinking about new capabilities and new features. So that's an excellent set of questions. Aditya, I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on maybe how
I
to
was
approach
actually
it?
I was gonna take that first question. We just had another question come in, which you guys can see now. When I update an agent, is the communication lost? And one thing to note here is after the initial deployment of the agent, all agent updates are done automatically by the platform. So you don't have to go in and manually do updates, as Jonesy mentioned, right? For our SaaS tenants, these updates are happening every 2 weeks, right? So we have a new version of the one agent every 2 weeks, but these updates are happening automatically as part of your regular scheduled, maybe like patches or restarts of your processes. That's when the new agent version will take into effect. So the communication is not lost because the new version is only taken into effect when you do actually restart or restart that process. So, but nothing manually; it's all done automatically. So.
Absolutely. And folks, these are great questions. Thank you very much. Keep them coming, okay? So I tell you what, let's get back into the demo flow. I
Sure.
interrupted there for a second.
No problem.
Aditya, just to sum up, you were about to show us how the Dynatrace One agent does this really interesting has this really interesting capability of being able to auto discover things and then from that
Yep.
build out this topology map. Take it away.
Yeah, so I mentioned that agent is doing two things after deployment, right? The first thing is that auto detection and auto instrumentation. So in this example here, right, we've dropped in the agent on a Linux box, for example, but all the underlying processes, the underlying technologies, the backend services, right? Here you see some Go processes, you might see some Apache Tomcat processes or your web request services. All these are automatically identified just by deploying the agent to that host level. And it's not just identified, but it's automatically instrumented. And this deep instrumentation is what allows us to get that method level, code level visibility. It's all done by that auto instrumentation by that one agent, right? And the second thing it's doing, apart from the auto instrumentation, is what we call our proprietary distributed tracing. And that's kind of what you see here in this, spider web of data. Don't be afraid of it. But this is essentially how the platform and how our AI ops engine understands the landscape of your environment, right? Every single transaction in your environment, every single call down the chain is captured. And that's what allows us to kind of build out this Smartscape topology network. It's pretty much an architecture diagram of how data is flowing through your application, right? What's talking to what, what's running on what, all these interdependencies that you see here is how the platform understands what's going on and how it provides the context behind all those metrics that we saw earlier. So context is a huge part and a huge differentiator for us, right? Nobody in the industry provides more context than we do. And this proprietary distributed tracing and being able to put everything into one entity model, as you see here, is basically how we do that. Alrighty. Jonesy, just stop me if we have any questions. All right.
I will absolutely, but you're doing great. Awesome.
Perfect. Alrighty. So now, so I mentioned, you can see here that Smartscape has 5 layers, right? We have application, services, processes, hosts. This is kind of Dynatrace nomenclature, right? Applications within Dynatrace are pretty much anything that is front facing, right? Your web applications, your mobile applications that your users are actually interacting with. Services and processes are, of course, that middleware, the backend infrastructure, the backend services that are making up those applications. And then you have your host level. So going back to our one agent, I mentioned that it can be deployed in both full stack mode and infrastructure only mode. That this deep instrumentation auto detection is going to happen in full stack mode. But if you deploy the agent in infrastructure only, what we're going to get is just the infrastructure level or host level metrics. And I've come now into one of our host views. This is a Windows host. We're just going to kind of step through each of these layers. So I'm looking here at a Windows host. As you can see here, we have properties and tags. A lot of this is ingested automatically by that one agent. So for example, if you're deploying on a Windows host in AWS in your AWS environment, we're going to automatically pull in those properties and those tags that you've already set up in your environment. So no need to come in and reinvent the wheel in the Dynatrace platform, right? We're just taking the tags you've already created, bringing them in, and we can leverage these tags when it comes to organizing your data, creating alerting profiles and creating alerts and things like that.
And just before you go on though, we can't say enough about these tags and this metadata, because it's this type of information that really helps us drive automation. So if I want to set up, for example, self-healing routines, if I want to be able to, drive real automation, the more metadata that you can associate with your entities, the more efficient, the easier it becomes for you to create rules to actually act on these entities. And this metadata is a key to being able to do that. So, thanks for actually showing that. It's something that we haven't really talked about and seen a lot of on previous Getting to Know Dynatrace sessions. So, Aditya, that's great. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just wanted to emphasize.
No problem.
That.
Yeah.
Keep going.
No, sure thing. Yeah, and I think it's very crucial, especially as we get more customers, trying to get into their cloud migration and get into more hybrid cloud environments. Leveraging these tags are very important, right? Because they've already done the legwork, and we're just leveraging those. But yeah, at the host level, what we're going to get is our infrastructure level metrics, right? What is my CPU utilization? What is my memory utilization? What are all the my network interface cards data, right? My traffic coming in, my connectivity. I have my disk related metrics, my disk space usage, my throughput, my disk latency, all these infrastructure level metrics. But the really neat thing about how we show this data is, and Smartscape kind of showed that, you saw it in layers, and everything is kind of in a hierarchy format. So here I'm at a host view, but going up the ladder of the hierarchy, which is processes, I can actually see all the processes here, and I can click here, all the processes that are running on this host and their CPU, memory utilization, their metrics as well. So in addition to monitoring and automatically identifying all these processes running on the host, we also monitor ourselves. So you can see kind of one agent processes, right? To ensure that we're not taking taking too much overhead on your hosts, we monitor ourselves, and you can see those metrics as well.
And so Aditya, typically, what can people expect? Like, first off, we get this question all the time. So
All the
Dynatrace is
time.
going to place an agent on a host, right? And the very first question most reasonable people have is, what's the performance impact going to be on my host? So what would you say, Aditya? What is the
Yeah,
performance impact?
generally, I would say we see about 1 to 2% CPU, closer to 1 on most cases. And then as far as memory is concerned, maybe a few hundred megs of RAM. So it's very minimal, right? In these big boxes that we see today, it's extremely minimal. But you do have that option to come in and validate that. Okay, is this one agent consuming too many of my resources? Is this causing any performance impact? You can come in and see it, but generally 1 to 2% CPU. Generally, the performance impact is very minimal. I've never personally run into an issue that our one agent is causing any performance related issues on any customer environment. So
Absolutely. This is what we've seen in production scenario after production scenario is the Dynatrace agent runs with very low overhead. So thanks for answering that question for me, Aditya. But I see there's another question that just popped up. This is an interesting one, sort of, in Kubernetes, is it possible to generate alert when a pod of a certain namespace enters a certain host? So I'm not exactly sure about that question, right? And Aditya, you tell me if you're sure, but I'll tell you that the one thing that I can safely say is that through our custom alert rules, you actually have just a tremendous amount of control over how Dynatrace is going to generate an alert based upon the performance or errors or exceptions that are being seen in either your pods or your namespaces, whatever it might be. That's a a really interesting question. But I got to tell you, with a couple of the I would say over the past 6 months, some of the new updates that we have when it comes to Kubernetes, Dynatrace just gives you just an immense capability to slice and dice and drive automation, monitoring Kubernetes in ways that are just super powerful. And much of the functionality now is out of the box. There's new container dashboards. There's new K8's infrastructure dashboards. There's all sorts of new things that we've put into monitoring K8s, because K8s ultimately is becoming the platform for modern applications. So Aditya, I'm sorry, we sort of cut you off there. So just keep going with the demo. Thanks for that question. That was a really good question.
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, we were looking at all the processes running on a given host. So now if I actually just click into a specific process, again, we're climbing up that hierarchy, right? We're still bringing in the context of the metadata and of the tags. I want to talk quickly about this vulnerability piece because you might have seen it at the previous screen as well. Our application security pillar has been growing, right? Right now, we're able to surface third-party vulnerabilities at runtime, and we're able to tell, because we see how that code is running, right, down the chain. We're able to tell you, is this vulnerability publicly facing? Is it currently being accessed? And if so, our AI assigns a security score to it to prioritize. Okay, you might want to fix this vulnerability first because it is publicly facing, but here are your other vulnerabilities that are in your environment that are currently not being publicly accessed. So this is the capabilities we have today to surface these vulnerabilities at runtime. And as Jonesy mentioned at Perform, we announced an extended partnership with Snyk, which is going to allow now for not just surfacing these third-party vulnerabilities, but to actually do runtime protection as well. So that'll probably be a future Get to Know Dynatrace as we deep dive into that. But I just wanted to highlight that security piece as well.
Yeah, and thanks for doing that. You're 100% right. It's a critical part of the platform. The more and more conversations that we have with customers and prospects and people that are starting to utilize Dynatrace, the more important this part of the discussion is. getting that visibility into threats and vulnerabilities that are baked into a lot of that open source software that we use to drive our applications. It's super critical. The Log4j issue that came out last year was the poster child as to why this is so critically important. And one of the more interesting things about Dynatrace is that when you deploy Dynatrace and this functionality is turned on, it will more often than not light up like a Christmas tree and show you exactly where you have potential vulnerabilities, and then give you suggestions as to which ones should you address first and which ones can you address to actually reduce the overall number of vulnerabilities. So it's not just going to just give you more data, it's going to give you answers in terms of, hey, address this vulnerability and it'll actually take care of X instances of that particular vulnerability across different hosts. So it's super powerful stuff. I'm glad you really mentioned it, Aditya.
Yeah.
Keep going.
And just one thing to add there is our security piece also leverages that one agent, right? It's not a separate security agent you have to throw on these
Exactly.
hosts and on these processes. Yeah. It's just from that same one agent deployment, we're capturing this this data as well.
And it makes so much sense, doesn't it? Like the one agent, you've shown us that the one agent's looking at a process. The one agent goes in and discovers all of the processes on a host. So of course it makes sense that if we can see all of the processes and we can see all of the the libraries that are being used by those processes, then obviously it makes sense for us to just basically flip a switch and then boom, give you all this visibility into potential vulnerabilities.
Yep. Sounds good. So within now we're in a process view, right? In the host view, we saw the infrastructure related metrics, CPU, memory, things like that. At the process view, we're going to get those JVM or container level metrics, right? What is my traffic and connectivity, right? What are my JVM level metrics, my suspension metrics, heap memory, things like that. Down here, I'm going to highlight these events, right? Through that one agent, automatically is capturing things like process restarts, process crashes, right? Any utilization events, configuration events, right? All these can be kept track of at the process level too. So anything that could have led to an issue is being captured as a process event here too.
So here's a really interesting thing when you're showing these events. You see that one, that list of events. These are deployment changes, right?
Yep.
So something's changed in our deployment. There's other examples where Dynatrace will pick out a deployment change and it'll say, hey, somebody updated this WAR file, and after that all of a sudden a problem occurs. Having access to these events, because normally what would happen in most organizations is you create a run book, right? And within your run book you make note of all of the changes that you make. Well, that's all well and good, but we all live in the real world, and while we should have a run book that we use to track all of our changes, it doesn't always happen, right? Human beings, these squishy things that we all are, we can make mistakes, we can make changes and not make a note of it in a run book, and then all of a sudden everything crashes on you and you're left going, what happened? And if that's not caught in that run book, then you don't know. But here with Dynatrace, their deployment, there was a deployment change. We caught that. We know that there is a deployment change. So that can be considered by our AI when it's actually doing its root cause analysis and its problem determination. So great. I'm really happy you pointed that out, Aditya. Keep going, man.
Perfect. So yeah, everything's in a hierarchy, right? We're able to see the calling processes to this specific process, and then again downstream, what does this process in turn call, right? We can see all the various services that are sitting on this process. So let me go ahead and just now climb the ladder now to the service level, and here's where we're going to get what people used to think Dynatrace could only do, right? Which is application performance monitoring. Here's the level that we're going to get the APM level metrics. And as you can see, we do a lot more than just these APM level, but here's where now you're going to see, all right, what is my response time? What are my failure rates? What is my CPU utilization? What is my throughput of each individual service, right? And as we saw in that Smartscape, we had that entire landscape mapped out. So you're not just coming here to find the APM level metrics, but we can understand dependencies also. We can dive into each individual, distributed trace, we can see the back trace. And before I dive into the back trace, I'm gonna click on view requests here, because I keep mentioning that we do, service level and method level visibility. And I wanna show you guys what I mean by that. For particular, service, here we're looking at a backend Tomcat service, right? Let me analyze my response time. So what is taking the majority of my response time metric for this particular service, right? If I know, for example, this service is performing slowly, I can come in and see, all right, is it performing slowly because I'm calling out to a database that's taking some time, or am I sitting in like a queue? In this case, it's purely service execution, code execution. I can drill down and actually view the exact functions, the exact methods, right? The method hotspots that's contributing to my response time. So in this case, we're looking at, functions that maybe this whole service is performing slow because of one specific method. And here's where we get to that service level visibility.
Hey, Aditya, I got to ask you this. It's a leading question, but
Mhm.
what did it take for us to get this? Like what did we have to do with Dynatrace to get what you're showing us on screen?
And we saw it, right? It's just deploy that one agent. That's it.
That's it.
Everything else was auto-instrumented, right? It understood all those underlying technologies. It went ahead and instrumented it, and that's what's giving you this method level visibility here. So,
absolutely, 100%. That's it. Is you just install the agent, and that's it, right? There's nothing else you need to do. So, folks, if you're familiar with technologies, like for example, if you're familiar with things like, I'm thinking application insights is a perfect example. Interesting tool set, but if you want to get visibility down to your methods, you as a developer have to think about that, and you have to actually write that instrumentation into your code. Dynatrace, you don't have to think about it. You just deploy the agent, and look what Aditya just showed us.
Yep. Yeah, and this is really great info, right? For a particular backend service, we're able to get code level, method level visibility. The same would hold true for a database, for example, right? So here's a database service. It's still in that, quote unquote, a service within the Smartscape view. But here, instead of method level hotspots, what I can actually do is, I can view all the database queries that are running to this database, right? And you can see it here. And how we're actually capturing this data is we're not actually have to be instrumented with the one agent on the database, but because we have that deep level instrumentation on the service that's calling out to the database, we're able to capture all this information down to the query level details. So all this is, I know a lot of people are interested in what can we do regarding databases. We can still get as deep as showing you the exact query that's taking time on your applications, or that's slowing down a front end, or things like that. So just wanted to highlight that as well. So now, we started at the ground up on how to deploy and all this. We've talked about metrics at the host level, the process service, now database level. So why did we show all these things, and why is it important to understand where all this data is coming from? It's now because, and we talked about this earlier, in trying to take a more proactive approach to observability, is every single metric that we've seen, right, at the host level, service level, these database metrics, response times, APM level metrics, every single metric that we see is being automatically baselined by our one agent. So what do I mean by that is, you don't have to go in and set custom thresholds saying, I expect my response time for this page to be this many seconds. This query should be executing in this many seconds, right? My CPU utilization should be XYZ. You don't have to go in and set any custom alerts or custom thresholds. All these metrics are being automatically baselined by our one agent. And anytime there's a deviation or an anomaly relative to those baselines, Dynatrace is what we call a problem card or problem ticket for you, and it's going to alert you right away. So think about that for a second, right? You don't have to go in and set anything else up. 95% of what you see on the screen here requires no manual configuration other than just deploying that one agent. You're going to be automatically alerted anytime there's an anomaly in your environment, right? So you don't have to go stare at that dashboard, like I mentioned, to wait for something to go wrong. You just get alerted, one notification saying, here is your problem card. And this is kind of the single pane of glass, right? The one-stop shop, as we like to call it. But this is Dynatrace's bread and butter, right? This is our AI doing the legwork for you. and telling you, who, what, where, when, why of what went wrong in your environment. So, it's not just that, hey, you might have had a problem ticket open last night. Here's the front end applications that were affected, your back end service components, infrastructure components that were affected. The platform does natively support SLOs. So a problem ticket will be able to tell you, have you reached your error budget? Are any of your SLOs in jeopardy as well?
So hold on one second, Aditya, because you just threw out a term that maybe some people on the call are not familiar with. Like if you're in the SRE space, like a site reliability engineer, then you know all about SLOs. But for those folks that are not into that space, what is an SLO?
Yeah, SLO is a service level objective. So these could mean any, business related objective or specific metric level objective. But these are your business goals, right? So if you have an SLO, for example, saying, I need my front end application, my login feature to take less than 3 seconds, right? That could be an SLO, for example. And then if you had a front end slowdown and maybe your logins is taking a little longer, your SLO, you would be breaching that service level objective. But with the platform, you're able to analyze and monitor, are your SLOs being affected, or are you on pace to hit those goals? So
very cool. Thank you for doing that and explaining that. Keep going.
Yep. Another thing we highlight is business impact, right? Yes, we're able to tell you our metrics just spiking on a chart, but because we do have that real user monitoring capability as well, we're able to tell you the business impact of any issue, right? How many of your users were affected by a particular issue, if any, right? And a really neat feature is what we call our session replay. So it's not just that we're notified saying, okay, I have hundreds of users that were affected in this 28-minute period, but what exactly did those users experience? I can drill down, and with our session replay and our real user monitoring, I can actually go in, view a specific session, right? I'm grabbing all this metadata for a particular user, where they were accessing this application from, but actually go and view back what exactly that user experienced on the front end, right? And I want to clarify that we're not recording anything here, right? Our agent's simply just taking changes in what we call the object model tree, and we're just taking those mouse movements, those changes, and stitching that together to be able to play this back for you. So we're not recording anything, right? All this data is masked by default. You have, that's a question we get all the time, right? Are you guys capturing all this info? By default, it is masked. So we have this ability to come in and view either via session replay or, in list format here, every single user action that that user took when experiencing said issue. And
Aditya, I got to go back for a second because you just showed a feature that I didn't even know that we had. So in that problem
it's a
card,
new feature,
that's
actually.
brand new. That's
brand new. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were
awesome.
able to show we were able to, through other views from the front end, dive into these user sessions. But now it's actually, as of a few weeks ago, from the problem ticket itself, we're able to go in and analyze those sessions of those users that were affected by an issue. So that's a really neat feature.
That's fabulous. Cool.
Yeah. And this front end piece, really quickly, is where we can really tie in the real user data with the back end data, right? So now I'm looking at one specific user action. For example, say it's loading of the homepage, right? And I'm just within a few clicks from that front end, I can dive from that specific user action and straight into the back end traces. But before I do that, I want to show quickly what I mean by we're capturing every single call down the chain and every single transaction. Here's what we call a service flow. Again, this is that one user action, but you can kind of see in visual format, and this is really neat, how that one call traversed the entirety of your backend, right? Did it go through proxies? Did it go through various microservices? Did it actually lead to a database call, right? And at each one of these stages, you can get response timing, response time related metrics, infrastructure related metrics to kind of see how that one specific transaction behaved. But this is what I mean when we capture every single transaction. This is we capture every single user action for every single user session for every single user coming into your applications, right? So that's the real power of this data.
All right, whoa, hold on. I'm going to sound like a broken record here. So you're telling me that I can go from a user in their browser and
Mhm.
I'm doing something within my browser, and I'm able to trace that transaction all the way back across all of these different services to the database. And what do I have to do to set that up?
Again, this front end piece is another thing that it's just from that one agent, right? The one agent's automatically doing this real user monitoring as well. So it's, it's injecting into that HTML of your front end to be able to grab this. So there's no additional configurations that you need to set up or anything like that. It's just, again, just for that one agent deployment, you're getting down to each individual user action, and then, dive into the back end traces. But it's giving that end-to-end visibility, right? It's not just purely back end, but we're kind of marrying that with the front end data as well.
All right. Before you go any further, it looks like we had another question that popped up here.
Mhm.
And maybe we can throw it up onto the screen in a moment. But there you go. How about this one? What happens if you have like an API management system or a queue like RabbitMQ or ActiveMQ between your app services that are being monitored by the one agents? Because sometimes that can break your traceability.
Yep. And that kind of goes to what I was speaking earlier with things like we have one agent extensions and things like that. We can actually get visibility into your messaging queues, whether it's RabbitMQ, ActiveMQ, things like that. And in this type of service view, you'd be able to see that as well. And the neat part is in certain cases, right? Some of these services are calling out to third-party services where we don't have the agent deployed, or whether you don't have access to that server, you don't even own that service. It's a third party. We'd be able to show that in this view as well. And because we're instrumented on the service calling out to that third party, right? We'd be able to grab timing metrics on when that call was made and when the response came back. So even if you don't have your agent deployed on that third party service, we'd be able to tell you, hey, that third party took this long. That's what's causing this issue. So the similar thing true for things like message queues and things like that. You'd be able to see that in this view as well.
And that actually got introduced a couple of months ago as well. So if you go into the left-hand hamburger menu,
Mhm.
there's actually
Yep.
now a new entry there for queues,
For
is there
queues.
not?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep. I can
there
pull
you
that up
go. So
here.
you've got, easy access at your fingertips to, all of the different
Yep.
queues that
Here's
that
here's ActiveMQ, RabbitMQ. Yep.
that was a great
Yeah, and
question. Thank you.
that's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Great
folks,
question.
listen,
So I'm gonna
we're
hop back.
and Aditya, I tell you what, we've got like maybe 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes
Yep.
for doing, walking through this demo, and that'll leave us like time for maybe another question or two. So
Sounds good. I'll
let's
wrap it up soon. Yep.
yep, let's wrap things up.
Perfect. So we've looked at this left side menu, right? What are my backend components that were affected? We've looked into the user side. Here's this automatic baseline that I mentioned, right? The response time exceeded that threshold by almost 200%. Again, you didn't have to go in and set any of these thresholds. This was done automatically. But on the right side is really where our differentiating comes in, right? With the platform, with our AI ops engine, analyzing all those dependencies that we saw in Smartscape, right? To be able to provide you the exact root cause behind the issue, right? So in this case, it's a backend service. If this was an expensive database query, if this was due to CPU or memory utilization, if this was a network device, whatever it might be, right? This root cause will point you in the right direction. Um, and it's very similar, right? In this case, this is going to be this is not just helping the devs, but it's helping your SREs, it's helping your ops teams, it could be helping your business folks understand, what's going wrong in your environment. That's why the problem card is the bread and butter. That's why it is so powerful, because it doesn't rely on, any one individual team within your organization that can use this. It's kind of organization wide. So in this case, right, it's a backend check destination service. If I wanted to, I can analyze the response time similar to how we saw it in the other view, right? Dive into the exact methods that is contributing to this issue. I mentioned that 95% of this page was out of the box. The 5% I'm going to show you here is this deployment event. And we kind of touched upon this at that process level view, right? Where we saw the deployment changes. But we can integrate with your automation tools, with your CI/CDs, to be able to push these deployment events into Dynatrace and have our AI engine keep an eye on things, right? So then we're able to not just alert you on, hey, you have a problem on the front end. Here's the backend service that is the root cause, but it goes a step further to say, here is the actual deployment. Here's the actual change list that was checked in this code that is causing now this issue. right? Here's all that metadata on that deployment event. So it's kind of that, going a step further. It's not just giving you the root cause in this case and giving you the exact function, but here's the exact deployment event that, that caused this issue in the first place. So that's a really neat feature. And that's the only thing on this entire page that required manual configuration. Everything else is out of the box. But yeah, I mean, the reason and I'll just wrap up with this, is the reason how we're able to do this is how our AI ops engine works. And it's not just using a correlation-based AI, right? But it's a causational-based AI. So that means, we're analyzing all these dependencies, and we're able to differentiate between, what's a symptom of another thing going down, and differentiate between the symptoms and the actual root cause. So, and that's pretty much, I know we started at the bottom and now we're at this problem ticket view, but that's kind of how I wanted to wrap things up, with showing exactly, ending with the root cause analysis. So.
Very, very cool. Thank you so much. We got one last question here. So what's this?
Yep.
What do we got? What if the other part of the trace is monitored in another Dynatrace environment? All right, so this came from Twitch. So this came from a user on Twitch. I'm thinking this one smells fishy. I smell a plant. That's an interesting question.
It's a great question, and something that actually just came up this week. We actually do cross-environment tracing. It requires setting up some tokens, setting up some APIs. But if you have multiple Dynatrace environments, you're monitoring various hosts on each environment, and you have your distributed tracing in two silos, essentially. There are ways to get that cross-environment tracing set up. So that's a great question, and I'm happy that came up, because that just came up this week for me as well. But we do have that functionality.
It is a great question, and it just sort of shows the here at Dynatrace, we know tracing. Like it's in our blood. And things like our ability to attach a header to a request and then be able to trace that from one environment to another. That's a super powerful example of how we support things like tracing across different environments. So hey, listen, Aditya, great demo. That was fabulous. Such a great demo. Really appreciate you coming out and doing that. And so folks, what we've done is John has thrown up a QR code. Give that QR code a scan, and that's going to take you to our Perform 2023 Resource Hub. So all the different things and content that I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we've got that all up on the 2023 Perform Hub. Scan that QR code. As always, if you want to take a trial of Dynatrace, you want to take it out for a spin, go to dynatrace.com/trial, and you can get full access to Dynatrace. It's not going to do anything goofy like ask you for a credit card or anything goofy like that. You'll be able to take the entire platform that we just showed you today, and you can take it for a spin yourself. So please feel free to take Dynatrace for a spin, and you'll be able to see all of the different things that Aditya walked us through today. Aditya, fabulous demo. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jonesy.
And
that was fun.
With that, folks, we're gonna wrap things up, and that's it for this session of Get to Know Dynatrace. We'll be back in 3 or 4 weeks' time for the next session of Getting to Know Dynatrace. And with that, folks, we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Jonesy.